Hey, thank you so much. As mentioned, I'm Bree Harvey, and Hannah and I are so excited to be here today and explore a few key trends in employee recognition. If you aren't familiar with Achievers, we've been in the HR tech space for over 20 years. We have a few hundred customers spread across the globe that collectively employ around 4 million employees. And on paper, we sell employee experience software that helps organizations improve the way they recognize, reward, and listen to employees. But really, we're in the business of helping organizations create experiences that leave people feeling seen, heard, and valued. And we know we've gotten it right when our customers see an uplift in things like employee engagement and retention and so on. One of the things that makes us unique is we have a dedicated research arm called the Achievers Workforce Institute. We host a lot of fun community events for HR leaders to connect, learn from each other, and get visibility on trends we're seeing emerge through our proprietary research. And today we're going to be talking about the 2022 State of Recognition Report, which is an annual report we do where we basically ask almost 6,000 employees from different employees about their work experience so that we can see patterns that are hopefully actionable to HR leaders. We're going to make sure that you leave with a free copy of that at the end of the program. In fact, all of the materials and research that we'll be talking about today, including the deck and this recording, will be included in the link that we give you at the end. So let's talk about how we'll be spending our time together. First and most importantly, I have to emphasize that the only goal we have for today is to leave you with at least one insight or idea that you can use this year to help improve the way your organization thinks about recognition. And we're not just saying it, we're asking you to hold us to it. At the end of the program, you'll see me begging to take our feedback survey so we can get your thoughts on what we could do to make future discussions like this more valuable. And we're putting our money where our mouth is because we're running a giveaway where we're offering you a penny for your thoughts and randomly selecting 10 people to win $25 gift cards. So please stick around for that. Before we start unpacking the story that the data appears to be telling about how to maximize the impact of workplace recognition in these great resignation times, we're going to first contextualize the conversation by getting clear about what employee recognition can and cannot help you with. But we'll spend a bulk of our time kind of picking apart some insights and prescribing a handful of recommendations that can help your organization elevate the way you practice recognition. We'll wrap it up by summarizing a couple of key takeaways. Then we'll take questions and check in with you at the chat. Okay, Paul, let's trigger our first poll. We're going to start broad. And as it loads, I'll quickly share that since April, the Achievers Workforce Institute has been interviewing CHROs from dozens of industries for a really big qualitative research project that we're doing. And I've been lucky enough to listen in on all the focus groups, and I'm not exaggerating when I say almost 100% of participants didn't hesitate for a second when they said that their top priority is recruitment or something related to retention or engagement. So we wanted to see where all of you stand with this. Let us know if your top priority is recruitment, something, like retention or engagement, all of the above, or even something totally unrelated. Also, a lot of time. Oh, I see. It's here on the right-hand side. So, ooh, okay. A big bulk of us, almost 80% are in the same boat of both hiring, retention. Yes, 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 yes. I wanted to bring that up because for the 9% of you that has recruitment top of mind, I wanted to be upfront and transparent about the fact that there are a number of challenges that recognition just can't directly help with, and hiring is one of them. We do have some cool stories where we've partnered with customers to help drive their participation of employee referral programs. Meridian Credit Union is probably the most sensational example. The results are pretty dramatic. But yeah, they use our platform to drive participation of their employee referral program by recognizing and rewarding employees for giving referrals. They've seen a 51% increase in referrals, and over the last couple of years alone, almost 40% of all their hires have come through the campaigns they've run through our platform. But I would say that examples like this are more illustrations of how our customers are being creative with kind of driving ancillary benefits of our platform versus what we typically see. However, what we will be addressing today is how employee recognition can be leveraged to move the needle on things like retention and performance. And Hannah, I know you have worked with some of the largest, most complex organizations in the world. And the first question I have for you, I'm going to ask you to pop on your old consulting hat and have you share the way that you would explain the relationship between recognition and retention or engagement to a senior executive who has maybe never connected the dots between how recognition influences broader business outcomes.
Okay, well, first of all, hi everyone on the phone. It's really great to meet you. Maybe not see you, but maybe in the future. So if I was to think about that, I would first lean into the data. Numbers don't lie. And when you look at the tons of literature that's out there on there, whether it's from consulting houses or academia, the Workforce Institute, is really hard to argue against the fact that recognition is associated with all of those elements you already talked about: retention, belonging, engagement. But when I put on my CHRO hat, the numbers don't actually get us the results that we want. And it's the hard job of all of our HR leaders, and obviously in partnership with the business, to really drive those outcomes that we want. And on top of that, for every organization, it's really unique. So there's lots of vertical specific considerations that all need to be accounted for when you're thinking about it. We know nothing in life happens in a vacuum, and we've got lots of customers, and Kellogg's is a really great example, who saw a great increase, 16% in fact, in their retention after partnering with us. But they also put a ton of energy towards some of their other things, not just the recognition program, but they were investing in tons of other areas within their strategy. And they will be the first person to tell you that although recognition has been really critical and a very important part of their success, it was just one of those levers. When I make that statement, I always get eye rolls that, people saying to me, more technology, or my workforce is offline, that isn't going to work for me. But the point isn't that technology helps, although it is helpful. It's that good recognition is the piece that resonates with everyone. And I caveat with good recognition because it has to be good to have the impact that we're talking about today. I could probably do like a full 60 minutes on just building that business case. But just because Deloitte's data shows that organizations with strong recognition programs have less turnover, around 31% less turnover, it doesn't mean that your investment will translate into that 31%. Don't get me wrong, I love Deloitte. In fact, I worked there for the better part of a decade, but I also spend the better part of that decade helping Fortune 500 companies figure out how to take that data and then apply it to their own organizational situations. So if I was to have my one takeaway or insight for this time together, is actually to stop spending your time around that 31% in turnover Instead, focus your energy on like listening and sharing in your experiences around the activation of it and the sustainability, all of those things we're going to be talking about today. And it's about putting effort into that communication plan that's going to get you there in your journey, then start measuring once you'll be able to put that in place.
Yeah, it's such a good point about accounting for those vertical specific nuances. Like today, we're going to be talking about our benchmarks across the board, but when we look at our customers that have largely offline employee populations that also don't have smartphones or even email addresses, like the level of program adoption and the success metrics we see out of coming out of that portion of our customer base looks a lot different than our customers with largely knowledge workers. So great tip. Okay, the other broad theme that has kind of surfaced through these CHRO focus groups that I want Hannah's take on has to do with the fact that when participants were asked to sort of explain the philosophy behind their people's strategy, a lot of them echoed this sentiment that although so much has changed in terms of where and how work gets done, the basic principles of how people are motivated haven't changed. A lot of them referenced concepts like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the reality that if people are concerned about their basic survival needs, then those higher level motivators like having purpose in your work or even recognition become a lot less important. And as you kind of move up the pyramid, you tend to see an uplift in engagement and by extension performance. There were callbacks to Herzberg's research about the difference between hygiene and motivation factors. And there seemed to be this kind of understanding that although hygiene level factors like compensation are fundamental and can absolutely cause dissatisfaction, they can't really have a sustained impact on engagement. And I found this interesting because I feel like this year there has been so much discussion within HR circles about compensation and benefits. And I just kind of wonder if, you know, all these different disruptions that have happened in the market have maybe caused some people to lose sight over these principles. So, Hannah, I'm curious to get your take on whether, there's this collective understanding within HR that the things that cause employees to be highly disengaged are often quite different than the things that can promote high levels of engagement and belonging.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you threw up that slide. I think one of the things that we do in HR is so often focus on the reasons why people have left, and think that these things are going to be a miracle cure in engaging the people that stay, but they really are, there really are interesting differences in why people stay versus people leave. And compensation and benefits are one of those main reasons that people consider leaving, yet it doesn't rank as high on the reasons why people stay. And so targeting those reasons why people stay before they start looking is such a critical factor. But in a very large but, you have to get the basics right, which is what you were alluding to before. These hygiene factors to focus on before you can then focus on those retention experiences. I feel like we've been talking about Maslow and these Psych 101 concepts and applying them in the workplace for years. And of course, if there are hygiene issues having to do with compensation, that's also going to cause dissatisfaction. But we all also know that there's a point where paying more money doesn't translate into stronger productivity or engagement. Analogies really aren't my superpower, but I think they're really helpful. So stick this one out with me because I'm going to try using it throughout our dialogue today. I want you to think about a house, and you could think of hygiene factors like compensation as really this foundation or the basic wiring of a house. And if you don't get the foundation right, like there's holes in your ceiling or no electricity or running water, that's really going to limit how enjoyable it is for your employees to be in that house. Engagement factors, on the other hand, are things that you put inside the house to make it really cool. The quality of your furniture, the people that you invite over, and then those programs that energize employees and make them feel connected in that home are the engagement factors that also lead to stronger performance and make people want to stay longer. The problem right now in this really heavy talent-centric market is that HR teams have forgotten that this concept of money is a hygiene factor. So there are so many organizations throwing money around in hopes that it becomes a higher order need, and then are really surprised when it doesn't create this sustainable and long-lasting retention within their organization. Don't get me wrong, the baseline of compensation has gone up and gone up dramatically, but not that compensation is a basic hygiene factor. And so we know the reality is most of us are facing really tight budgets, and we're probably going to continue to feel this pressure of doing more with less. But it's also sometimes good just to step back and reflect on what we really know around core engagement and basic hygiene principles. So practical learning nugget alert. Remember that if employees are consumed with this basic survival piece, then your efforts to try and engage them through initiatives aimed at trying to address some of those higher order needs, it can be beneficial, great, but it may not have like that transformative or sustaining impact on meatier things like engagement.
Yeah, it's like if a person is unable to get their basic needs met, like throwing a team pizza party or launching a steps challenge isn't gonna like move
Right.
the needle on their engagement. And although no one else has their videos on, I'm sure there was a lot of shaking heads when you talked about the point that there's this like threshold where like at some point more money doesn't equate to stronger performance. Yes, 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 yes. Now, I would love to kind of build on this theme of distinguishing between hygiene versus motivation factors because there was a finding from this year's State of Recognition report that at first I wasn't sure supports or totally contradicts a common recommendation we make to potential customers. So I want Hannah's take. But again, for the background, every year for the State of Recognition report, we survey about 6,000 employees. And this year, we added in a question that asked employees to share whether they felt their compensation was fair or not. And we asked it in a really simple way so we could kind of split the respondents into two groups, those who felt fairly paid and those who did not. And we weren't at all surprised when we looked at the first group to kind of see that employees who felt both fairly compensated and regularly appreciated for their work, you can see on the table they were, way more likely to be engaged, have stronger sense of belonging, and so on. Duh, like who would have guessed fair play plus regular appreciation is a winning combo. But what we didn't expect to find is that when we looked at the cohort of employees who did not feel fairly compensated, recognition seemed to bolster engagement even when those employees felt like their pay was unfair. Moreover, employees who claimed that they rarely received recognition, but felt fairly compensated were actually less engaged and had stronger intent to leave than those who felt both underpaid but appreciated. So when I first saw this, it did feel very contradictory to the school of thought we've historically subscribed to, which is that what we were just saying, like if employees don't have their basic needs met because they're not making enough money to live, recognition can't fill that gap and shouldn't fill that gap. And I've always felt good about the fact that when organizations approach us and are interested in partnering with us, but we don't think that they're kind of at that right level of organizational readiness in terms of the hygiene aspect of their people strategy. Like we're always so upfront and honest about the fact that they would be better off first addressing those lower level needs before doubling down on recognition, but then I saw this, I was like, I could also see how there could be a case to be made that maybe it's possible that some companies who have compensation issues could still see some benefits from leaning into their recognition strategy. Hannah, what's your take on this?
First of all, I feel like in so many places in life, we have space for lots of things to be true, and this is, of course, no exception. I love that our research is continuing to break down the barriers of what we think is true to give us what is actually true for today and what's true in today's space and time. And so I love that this is going to be, continues to be part of our research mandate. But when it comes to this, I'd have to say I think organizations benefit from first prioritizing the parts of the people strategy that could impact those lower level needs, of course, yes. Could organizations who aren't yet competitive in terms of compensation potentially see some benefits from putting more energy into making employees feel valued for the unique combinations? Of course. I mean, that's what the data just showed us. But I agree with the point you made, Bree, that recognition shouldn't ever be used in an attempt to make up for gaps in compensation. If there's any expectation that you're bolstering compensation through recognition, you're going to run into challenges. Like if you go back to this house strategy again, imagine two different people in two different houses that have leaking roofs. Yikes. Both occupants are going to be baseline unhappy with their overall living condition, of course. If you provide one of them with a comfortable couch to sit on, some Wi-Fi, a few Uber gift cards for some food, it probably makes sense that that person with the dry, comfortable place might be comparatively less annoyed than the person who doesn't have those extra comforts. But those extra comforts or perks that they'll take the edge off and maybe a little bit of that leaky roof, but it's a Band-Aid solution. And they're only going to be a mitigating factor for a short period of time. Eventually, that roof, those hygiene factors need to be fixed. So recognition should be thought of as a way to complement the total reward strategy and help provide clarity to employees about what type of behaviors that business really finds valuable. So I don't think we throw everything out just yet. I think there's a complementary opportunity there. But we have to remember that eventually we're going to have to go back to those basics and get them right.
Yeah, I love that. Holding space for both things to be true. I love it. Okay, Hannah, how about we check in with our friends in the chat? Everyone, give us a little hello if you are with us. If you are down to play a little guessing game, say hey. Hello, hello. Hello, Amy, Laura, Brenda, Dawn, Joe. Look how fast of a reader I am. Hey, Nick. Okay, so I'll give you a second to kind of read what's on the screen here. This is a fill in the blank question and some possible answers on the screen. This is a no judgment zone. We're asking about the state of recognition report that, again, we asked employees a bunch of questions. For this particular one, we asked how often they were recognized and how often they think about looking for a new job. And we found that there was a group of employees that were recognized at a specific frequency that we want you to guess that were 5 times more likely to say they, quote, rarely think about looking for a job. So let us know in the chat if you think it was employees that were recognized daily, weekly, every other week, monthly, quarterly, weekly. Okay, every other week. Let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. Thank you so much for your participation. You guys are so smart. Everyone is so smart. What we actually saw was that employees who were recognized weekly were 5 times more likely to say that they rarely thought about job hunting. The reason why I wanted to highlight this finding is because it really underscores one of the most common misconceptions that prevents organizations from squeezing more juice out of their recognition efforts. And it has to do with the fact that unfortunately, recognition doesn't work unless it's frequent. It has been extremely well documented that recognition is a short-term need that has to be satisfied on an ongoing basis. And even without going into the neuroscience, we all have this intuitive understanding that very few things in life work without regularity, learning a new language, getting fit. You can't see very good, but my little puppy, we just got a puppy, and I've been spending a lot of time in puppy training, and everything goes back to this principle of frequent positive reinforcement. And there's really no one arguing against this idea, but there are some slight variances in the data and differences in opinion when it comes to defining how frequent is frequent enough. Gallup suggests the emotional uplift in and performance uplift associated with recognition lasts about 7 days. Great places to work. Research recommends the ideal cadence once every 3 weeks. Uh, we look at our best performing customers, that is those who see the highest increases in outcomes like engagement and so on. The one thing that they all have in common is that they average at least one recognition per employee per month. So naturally, that's our recommended benchmark across our customer base. And I will acknowledge, I know this may sound aggressive, especially if your current approach to recognition places a lot of emphasis on rewards, but we have consistently seen across most industries that really the tipping point is one recognition per month. And, being able to sustain that level of recognition frequency across your customer base isn't something that happens overnight, but we do have a very defined playbook of how to get there. We've developed it and iterated it over 20 years to kind of help navigate the change management process to get there. And it's not effortless. It's absolutely a journey, but we have clients that regularly blow this benchmark out of the water, Bay Health being one of them. I'm pretty sure that if we had told them back in 2015 before we launched their program that there would be a time when their average frontline employee would receive almost 4 recognitions in a month, I don't think that they would have believed that was possible, but now they're winning all kinds of awards, cool things that they've done with their program. Meyer is a retail customers we have that has about 70,000 employees. And the fact that their average employee is receiving almost 8 recognitions per month is crazy because these people are not in front of computers all day. And Hannah, I could go on and on with examples like this from literally every sector. But I'd love for you to kind of speak to the journey of how that level of recognition frequency is possible. Like, how can a company go from averaging like less than 2 recognitions per year to more than 12? Is it snake oil?
Very good question, because when you made this statement before, the chat lit up with questions about how crazy you sounded. So I'm happy to be able to contribute to some of that demystifying this category. I think that leap can feel really, really daunting. So let's clarify what we mean about that benchmark of one recognition per month. We're not talking about traditional top-down recognition that's associated with really high dollar rewards. I think for a long time, the market thought of recognition as rewards and service announcements and anniversaries and nomination-based awards or spot bonuses. And there's lots of place for those more formal types of recognition. But in the last 10, 15 years, there's been lots of compelling evidence that surfaced about demonstrating and showing how critical it is to involve frontline employees and to enable multi-directional recognition. So recognition flows from everywhere, not just top down. So it felt like that was daunting, or I think as someone put it, was it disingenuine around being able to send one recognition a month or one recognition a week. It's not just coming from you, it's coming from all over. So when we think about some of those service awards, anniversaries, don't get me wrong, I still covet the fry pan that I got for my 5-year anniversary. But hearing from my CEO that I rocked a recent town hall presentation, or from my colleagues that they appreciated my challenge to one of their decisions, or that my team enjoyed that it felt like our offsite was really, really inclusive. It's those micro things that have a much more sustainable impact and help guide me in the direction that I'm taking at work, and help make me feel really good multiple times over, not just in that one moment. So when we look at those case studies that Bree was talking about, who are averaging those 8 recognitions per employee per month, I want to make sure that we're not taking it out of context. And they were able to reach that level because they placed a lot of focus on empowering that 360, those frontline employees, to be part of the process, to do their part, to call it the good work that's being done all around them. Leaders and managers, we can't just simply do this alone. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. And we don't typically have the highest level of visibility into the actual work being done, the stuff that needs to get recognized. Another thing to think about in terms of really trying to bolster that overall recognition frequency is you have to embrace the low dollar rewards, really decoupling that concept of rewards from recognition. So in the eyes of the employee, they seem separate. So you're not setting that expectation or that idea that it has to come with a dollar value. I think most HR leaders get that. Extrinsic motivators like incentives and rewards have a really weak exchange with our modern workforces. And a lot of research has come out that illustrates the reality that although providing meaningful rewards, very important, love my fry pan, it's shown to have a really limited impact on performance engagement. It was hearing from my team that really inspired me to do more in that space. And we've traditionally placed a lot of emphasis on rewards, and I think employees tend to think of recognition and rewards as the same. And so talking about that disingenuine or that expectation that came through in the chat, when we see higher levels of entitlement, when employees expect those rewards and can sometimes even feel resentful if they think that award amount wasn't equivalent to their contribution, which ironically can actually cause disengagement, which is really, really frustrating. And so decoupling that reward and recognition place is so, so critical. We recommend our customers, for example, to confine the recognition program so that each recognition is well under $10, which I know doesn't sound like much. But we had this really great opportunity to speak with the VP of Total Rewards from Kellogg's, who's one of our clients at SHRM last year. And I love this quote because it's so simple and I feel like it really captures some of the things that I was just talking about, which is this concept of shifting away from infrequent high dollar recognition to maximize your budget and really complement a total reward strategy, the true sense of total reward strategy. So he's like, basically, if you've budgeted $100 in a year, per year for an employee, and the end goal, got to keep in mind the end goal here is to align employees' key behaviors. Are you going to be better off recognizing each employee twice a year with that $50 reward? Or are you going to be in better shape if you actually break that $100 into these micro bonuses so people are recognized continuously throughout the year? You're not only going to get more bang for your buck, but employees are going to have this stronger sense that the work that they're doing is really, really matters. Even poor performing employees just want to feel seen and appreciated. And we know what gets recognized gets repeated. And if your strategy is centered on infrequently rewarding outcomes instead of continuously recognizing the journey, it doesn't matter how much you end up spending on rewards, the impact of your effort is going to be limited.
Yeah.
So that was a lot.
No,
a few nuggets in there that took away from some of the things we've been seeing in the chat.
I love the practical nugget alerts, and that's one of the taglines our implementation team uses, like recognize the journey but reward the outcome. And it actually segues nicely into how we're going to round out the answer to this. How the heck do you go from averaging like 3 recognitions to more than 12 recognitions per employee per year? So we've kind of touched upon the importance of encouraging frontline workers to do their part to help build a culture of recognition by calling out good work they see being done around them. We addressed a few reasons why leading with low dollar rewards is the way to go. But now we're going to talk about how non-monetary recognition can enhance recognition frequency. But first, we're going to do another check-in with the chat. I want to know if I'm preaching to the choir here on this point. If a lot of you are already embracing, non-monetary recognitions, we can skip ahead. Paul, go ahead to the next slide. So yeah, let us know in the chat if you have already introduced kind of tech-enabled, formal, non-monetary recognition. I'm not talking about like verbal praise or sending an email, more formal, like transparent, non-monetary recognition that is inclusive and no, 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 yes, no, no, yep, okay. Kind of a mixed bag, but plenty enough people that are on it, like Jennifer, on a limited scale. So we'll go ahead and continue with this point. And for those of you who have already caught on to the fact that non-monetary recognition isn't just good for the wallet, good on you. The remarkable thing about non-monetary recognition that sometimes I think can get overlooked is that studies show that as long as a recognition adheres to basic recognition best practices, the ones that we've all heard 1,000 times, that is, as long as the recognition is timely, specific, or meaningful, and so on, non-monetary recognition can have a similar impact on performance and engagement as recognition tied to an award. This is a study we did for our customer CVS across their 200,000 employee population, where we basically mapped employee engagement scores to non-monetary recognitions received. And we found that employees who received just one non-monetary recognition per month were 43% more engaged than those who did not. And although on some level, I feel like it's hard to overstate the power of non-monetary recognition, I also want to be careful to not oversimplify its use case, because there was a 2 or 3 year kind of period of time when we were testing out the hypothesis, like, wow, if non-monetary recognition is this great, can we build a successful recognition program that's purely social and has zero rewards? And ultimately what we found is, although it is possible to sustain a successful recognition program without any rewards, it's a lot harder to do. And if the organization is both willing and able to earnestly follow all of our standard best practices, we typically don't see the type of results that we want. So we recommend a blended approach to help, and we are really focused on helping our customers aim to hit at least 50% non-monetary recognition. But a lot of our customers, are well above that, averaging like 70% non-monetary recognition. And Hannah, I know you have a lot to say about non-monetary recognition, but if you had to pick one tip to help help an organization who hasn't yet incorporated non-monetary recognition into their strategy, what would it be?
Sure. We already alluded to the fact that not all recognition is created equal. For any recognition to be impactful, including non-monetary, it really has to adhere to a bunch of good practices. The report goes into depth in all of those, and I would highly recommend that you go in there and check that out. It's got some really great tips on how to make it great. But one simple thing, if I was have to call it out, that can really make a big difference is helping employees understand the difference between praise and recognition. And this goes back to what I said at the start of our discussion today of when I said it has to be good recognition. Praise can be really nice. And I know we had a couple of comments. What do you mean by recognition in our chat? So praise can be nice, but it's really generic. It's not specific about a person's action. And so I could say to Bree, hey, thanks for being awesome. And while she may appreciate hearing that, it's not really meaningful. And she doesn't exactly know what to do with that. And so recognition, on the other hand, is about containing observations about a person's behavior. In fact, let me just pull something up here. I pulled this out of our recognition platform, our Achievers recognition platform this morning, and it's about Bree. It says, Bree, You absolutely sparkle with customers and prospects, specific about the audience we're talking to, and was not only I blown away with how you expertly brought to life a virtual event, but I was so proud of how well you represent our company and our mission. We're so lucky to have you playing an important role, and you do it so well. So you think about that awesome recognition that was posted earlier this week towards Bree. You can see how that is so much different than just praise around those concepts of specificity along the journey that she's taking and the impact that she's having. And it's really important to create those details in there, the impact that it's having and why it matters. And that creates that emotional and strengthens that impact between the receiver and is going to give more clarity to the employee about what type of behavior is really, really valuable to you as a manager, to you as a peer, to you as a business. So I know I keep throwing tips out there, but another nugget is if you could put this concept of social recognition on steroids, think about increasing that power of visibility because the social recognition so often is shared in that one-on-one moment. And it can be such an incredible opportunity to be more inclusive and amplify beyond that one-on-one moment. And you can try to run a campaign around this and communicate to a manager how important social recognitions are. But without technology, it can be really, really difficult. So to track the effort, both qualitative and quantitative, and the impact that you're having with the initiative and the impact your employees are having, think about ways that technology can really enable that.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to the social utility piece. Like when recognition is transparent and people get that rush of like, oh, my coworkers, my boss's boss all saw this awesome thing that I did, it really does help to amplify the impact of that recognition. And like you said, one of the benefits of having a formal recognition platform is you can get like direct line of sight into both the quantity and quality of recognition. So you can gauge whether your efforts to do things like train employees are working or not. Okay, we are going to shift gears and tackle our final insight, and it has to do with something we've all known for years, and that's the reality that managers hold the keys to our businesses in so many ways. The Workforce Institute data is consistent with what Gallup and many others have found in that managers are responsible for influencing up to 7% of an employee's experience. So manager effectiveness is something the Workforce Institute has been hyper-focused on studying for a long time, but especially since the pandemic. And the state of recognition has a whole section exploring the impact that manager recognition has on different outcomes. One of the key findings was that recognition wasn't only the number one predictor of overall manager effectiveness according to employees, but employees claimed that they were regularly appreciated by their manager. They were 3 times more likely to rate their manager as effective. As you can see on this slide, employees who claimed their manager regularly recognized them were a lot more likely to have higher intent to stay and overall job satisfaction and so on. This wasn't at all surprising for us to see because when we study the impact of manager sent recognition on business outcomes within our customer base, we see the same phenomenon. This is an analysis we did for a large retail customer of ours, Coburn's, where we basically mapped turnover to manager recognition and found that the locations with higher manager recognition had on average 40% lower turnover. This one, someone asked in the chat about like, oh, can we map this to like performance reviews too? And this is an example where we took our customer quest, we took the number of manager recognition sent over a specific period of time, and we mapped it to their performance ratings and found that their top performing managers who, quote, exceeded expectations sent an average of almost 40% more recognitions than those who met expectation. Um, we kind of see the same thing when we look at manager recognition received. ATB Financial is a customer that has like shared this cool story at different things like our annual customer conference, where when they look at within their Achievers platform and at the managers who receive at least 13 recognitions per year, they consistently have the teams with the fastest growing customer portfolios and the highest customer satisfaction scores and so on. And we have so many examples like showing this insane link between manager recognition and pretty much any metric an organization would care to spend time or money to measure in the first place. So the big takeaway here is that there's a very compelling case to be made for why businesses who focus on addressing the knowledge and skill gaps that often exist within manager populations, that can, help them, like prevent them from being better recognizers. Those businesses will have a competitive advantage over those who don't. So Hannah, I would love to get your kind of temperature on manager recognition frequency. And I'm curious to know if the way that you think about it has changed at all since you started kind of familiarizing yourself with a lot of our customer case studies around this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I noticed Dawn in the chat also had this question. And prior to joining Achievers, I always knew manager recognition was important. It's a big part of who I was as a manager. I'd seen all these stats showing the correlation between manager recognition and things like engagement. And I thought that good managers just do those things, not that the organization should support the managers in doing so. And I thought I was good at it, I think. And in the moment of giving recognition, I also thought, hey, great chance to throw in a little feedback, sandwich that feedback with some recognition, like so many faux pas in that statement. But I feel like all of us were that manager at some point. But of course, I didn't have a platform like Achievers that automatically measured how manager recognition activity was really influencing those outcomes, the outcomes on my team, like turnover rates. And so I thought of it as more like a soft benefit. And it was never really on my radar to track manager or to help drive manager recognition as granularly as our customers do. And I certainly wish I had the data to connect that point. Something I could obviously never get by running my own little recognition approach, my own little recognition shop. It's really cool to see how many of our companies that we work with are using really different aspects of the data that they're getting from their recognition program, the links that they're pulling in from their HRISs, things like manager send activity, which really allows them to be more agile with their retention strategy. We had the VP of HR from ECI share out recently how every quarter his team actually goes into their Achievers platform, their recognition platform, and pulls out a report of managers who have sent the fewest recognitions. And then they filter it, great integration to be able to map it to engagement scores. And not surprisingly, without fail, every quarter, the least engaged teams are almost always the least recognized. And so they take that list of managers and can action it. They run targeted campaigns to help managers understand how the recognition, all this stuff we were sharing earlier, can really not only help them rally their own team, but help them to retain more people, follow on, less onboarding, less backfilling roles, blah, blah, blah. So I think about an opportunity here, one that I'm just starting my own journey on, and that's about directly connecting this information to be able to share back with managers to help them influence their behavior. So much of our manager feedback is anecdotal, and we have a great opportunity to elevate those conversations with data. In fact, at Achievers, we've just taken this one step further and given our managers their own empowerment scores, which of course includes recognition frequency. We're a recognition company. And as a result, we've seen an almost 15% year over year uptick in the positive feedback from their employees about how their managers are approaching and actioning and improving.
Yeah, I love that ECI example, that Andrew Pryor example. I feel like it's such a good illustration of one of the biggest best practices that we're focused on, which is offering recognition training directly to managers throughout the year and re-educating them about the basics of how to send an effective recognition and, more importantly, why it matters for their own success. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I saw there were a few questions around that. But first, I wanted to talk about this kind of funny finding that surfaced in the recognition report that we've actually seen on previous reports. And it's this like crazy disconnect between HR and managers, where basically 91% of HR practitioners say they offer recognition training, but only 53% of managers said that they received recognition training. And I kind of like laughed when I saw this because I've spent a lot of my career on the training side of the house. And I feel like no matter how hard I tried, I could not escape this disconnect where employees claimed they didn't get training on something they absolutely got training on before. And it was so frustrating. So Hannah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts around like how the perception between HR and managers could be so different when it comes to training.
Yeah, this is a perennial disconnect. So it's not just around training, but we see it pop up a lot. And so empowering HR and leaders with data is really, really critical. And I'm sure every organization has like unique circumstances that contribute to this disconnect. But I sometimes wonder if it may stem from the fact that a lot of these trainings, particularly around things like recognition, aren't mandatory. It's like a nice to have. And just because a company offers it doesn't mean that 100% of the managers will show up. And so often we also don't do much training around recognition beyond onboarding. And so it happens really early when so much more information is already coming in there. Even though we live, eat, breathe recognition at Achievers, because it's such an integrated part of our culture, this is actually the area that we still have a lot to work on as well. Bria, I know I mentioned this to you as we were preparing for this session, but this actually triggered me to take this practical learning nugget and actually remind our HR director that we got to put some trainings in the calendar for next month. Certainly, I think if companies taking a one and done approach to recognition training, the more likely that you're going to see that disconnect in perceptions take place.
Yeah, and I don't think that recognition is unique in this way. Like any culture initiative is going to probably fall flat if you take a one and done or a set it and forget it approach. To be specific, we recommend our customers to incorporate recognition training into existing meetings and events to provide periodic refreshers on the how and why of recognition at least once a year. And kind of like a fun fact, I had like a team of fact checkers go through this presentation to make sure that I wasn't inadvertently like misrepresenting the information. And this slide up until yesterday read, recognition training should be 3 times a year. And they were like, oh no, we wish that was the case, but it's just 1 time a year is best in class. We wish it was 3 times, but yeah, circulating examples of what good recognition looks like for different groups is important. It's like if you're already going through the trouble of gathering leaders and managers together for like a leadership summit or whatever, you might as well take that opportunity to give them a refresher on how they can get recognition right and how it can be a productivity multiplier instead of a time suck. And oh my gosh, we are quickly approaching time. I sure hope you don't feel like this because we've covered a lot. We're going to check in with you in the chat in a second and we're going to take some questions. But before you do anything, I want to recap a few points and we'll make sure that you get the deck and all the reference material from today. So yeah, we basically started out kind of talking about how the use case for recognition in the works is limited in the sense that there are key areas of your people strategy that recognition can't really help solve, including the 9% of people who are looking to solve for hiring. But recognition can help with things like retention and engagement. We chatted about why your efforts to leverage recognition to improve culture will be hindered if baseline level needs are left unmet. And we postulated about new research that could suggest that recognition may, in some cases, temporarily take the edge out of disengagement for employees who feel unfairly paid, but really it should not be looked at as a long-term solution for filling gaps in compensation. We talked about how although experts are resoundingly in agreement about the fact that recognition doesn't work unless it's frequent, there are some differences of opinion when it comes to defining how frequent is frequent enough. Some data suggests the magical number is as frequent as monthly. Our data sort of suggests the benchmark is monthly. We broke down the 3 steps of reaching optimal levels of recognition frequency and explained why the change management process requires moving away from top-down awards that are rooted in it can't just be top-down and you can't just lean on rewards. You have to embrace peer-to-peer recognition and low-dollar awards. We talked about non-monetary recognition and why that's important for employees and to make sure you're being very clear about the differences between praise and recognition. We discussed the critical role of manager recognition and how the skill and knowledge gap that holds leaders back from being better recognizers can and should be addressed through regular training and communication. We're going to fire up the chat soon, and we're going to take questions. Make sure to put them in the Q&A panel so that they don't get lost in the chat. But please listen up. It would mean so much to me if you give us the gift of your feedback. We get the best suggestions from this audience. And again, we're giving away $10, $25 gift cards that honestly we have left over from an in-person event that got canceled because of COVID. But we're happy to get rid of them in exchange for your thoughts on what we could do to make future programs more valuable to you. It's totally anonymous, so if you don't include your email, you won't be entered into the giveaway, which is totally fine. You'll also get an email with the link to the feedback survey and all of the deck and the follow-up resources that it'll also be in the chat. Also, we'd love to hear from you directly on LinkedIn. I'm about to leave on vacation, so you may not hear from me for a while. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in one question. And this one, yeah, Candace, let's have Hannah answer this question. It's like basically the question is, well, what do you say to managers who are like, I'm too busy. I don't have the bandwidth to take time to recognize these people. You're giving me all this extra work since the pandemic. Like, how do you reply to a manager like that, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked that one from Candace, because its busyness is by far the biggest excuse that leaders and managers cite when they're trying to explain why they missed the mark on recognition. And in my humble opinion, when I hear that, it's an indicator that we've got some work to do. We have to shift that perception within the organization about the strategic value of recognition. And you got, Bree, I counted 14, not 5 tidbits, but hopefully someone will get 1 or 2 from that. It's because if someone views recognition as productivity, a productivity suck, instead of a productivity multiplier, then it's probably a knowledge gap that can be, luckily, addressed fairly easily through training and campaigns and education. I think it would be difficult to overstate how important it is to put energy towards that people leaders understand that. Because when they take the time to not only communicate to employees what behaviors they want to see more of, that it really helps the business amplify more of those behaviors. That is not a productivity suck, that is a productivity multiplier. And what gets recognized gets repeated. And what gets recognized by the boss, really gets repeated. So I think that's one of my big takeaways for that question.
I love that. As soon as you hear like, oh, I'm too busy, that should immediately be an indicator that there's a little bit of a knowledge gap of like, how can I even use recognition? Oh my gosh, we're at time. Everyone, let me know in the chat um, how yes, this will be sent out, the deck and the recording, all of that. I think you should get it by the end of this week. I don't know who's sending it, but I'm sure it'll be very soon in your email boxes. And I also saw that there was a question about like, can you speak to the format of verbal versus written recognition? I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Hannah, but from in my opinion, it's like it doesn't matter if it's verbal recognition or written, as long as it's following those best practices. That is, it's timely, not too much time has passed between the exhibited behavior and the recognition. It's specific, it's meaningful. If there's like a social kind of transparent component that enhances it. It's less about the format and more about the content.
Absolutely. Go back to that hierarchy of needs. We know that the basic element of recognition is really critical for the employee's experience. When you get that basic right, there's awesome opportunities to amplify that beyond the one-on-one conversation. And that's when you can start to get those accelerating those amplification impacts. And so think about the opportunities once you've got those basic needs settled for your employees.
Amazing. Paul, I'm sorry we went 2 minutes over.
Oh, well, no worries. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. You may now disconnect and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you everyone so much for being here. This was really fun. Take our feedback survey.